Last year was probably the year where I read the most books, I think, in my entire life. I read a total of maybe 9 or 10 books. I'm pretty sure if I'm counting it right. And I think I read at least 10 books last year. And this is coming from a person who used to hate reading. I'm not a person who likes reading, who loves reading. I didn't grow up reading a lot of books. I wasn't really ever interested in reading. But last year something changed and I was able to read cover to cover at least 10 books. And these kind of books, these are not, children's books. These aren't comics or mangas. These are not like simple books. There's no pictures, nothing like that. But cover to cover, finished them all and was able to learn a lot from each and every one of them. Now I'm going to explain to you how I was able to do this, how I was able to go from a person who absolutely hated reading, who had no interest in reading any kind of books, to read books on the daily. And now it's become part of my daily routine. I cannot go a day without reading at least a few pages of a book. Anytime I do, it feels like I'm missing something. Something is missing out of my day if I do not read at least a few pages from any kind of book. Okay, before I get into how I did that, I want to address something. I feel like if anyone is like me, if anyone hates reading books and has never been interested in reading or finds reading to be boring, I feel like a main contributor to that is the school system. I feel like school has given us this false perception of books and has given us kind of this negative image when it comes to reading. When we were in school, we were told to read certain books that we had no interest in, certain stories that we really didn't care about. And so every time we think of books or reading, we associate it to what we had to do back when we were in school, whether primary school, high school, college, university, etc. I want you to get that out of your head. I want you to change that kind of perception that you have on books, because reading is so much more than just information. There are stories behind these books, there are images, there are sounds, there are smells, there are colors. There's so much more to books than just taking notes and using your highlighter, which is the main things that you had to do in school. The main things that you had to do in school was read and memorize what you were reading, because then you'd be tested on it. And when you're tested on something, it's hard to enjoy it. It's going to be extremely difficult to enjoy reading when you know you're going to be tested on it. That stress of being tested on it takes away the fun of reading. So the first thing that I did, which kind of connects to the point that I was talking about before, is that I started reading books that I was actually interested in. I started choosing books that I felt like aligned with my interests, my likes, whatever kind of thoughts or feelings or whatever kind of situation I was in. I would choose a book that I felt like related to that. And that helped a lot more with the process. Picking up books that you actually enjoy and actually have an interest in, I think it's pretty self-explanatory, but it will make it so much easier and so much more enjoyable to read. And you'll actually notice that once you're reading a book you enjoy, you will not want to put it down. You'll be able to complete this book within, depending on the size, within a week to 2 weeks, 3 weeks, depending on how many pages you're reading. And the more you get into the story, the deeper you get into it, the more pages you're going to read, the more chapters you're going to get through. And before you know it, you've already read 3-4 books. The second thing is to not put a time limit on how fast you want to complete a book. Going back to school, when they told you to read books, they would tell you to read a certain amount of pages by a certain time. And I feel like we've kind of kept that in our brains, where we feel like we need to complete the book in a certain amount of time. But that is not the case. You can read at any kind of pace that you want. Recommended at least 10 pages a day. You can start off with 5, but try and gradually, pick up the pace, because you don't want to be stuck on one book for like a year. Because trust me, once you're stuck on a book for that long, then you're going to start getting bored. You want to move on to a new story or a new kind of topic or a new kind of genre. So that would help. Being able to gradually pick up the pace from maybe 5 pages a day to 10 pages to 20 pages, it will help speed up the process. But at the same time, don't feel like you're rushing yourself to get a book completed or a book done, which is something that I still struggle with. I feel like I need to complete a book by a certain time so I can move on to this next book. But if you're constantly thinking about the next book, you're not going to be able to enjoy the book that you're reading now. So take your time, be present in the moment, and just enjoy it. Okay, the third thing that helps when it comes to reading books and actually being able to enjoy it is being in an environment that is reading friendly. Now, what I mean by that is if you're surrounded by noise, if you're surrounded by people, if you're surrounded by outside factors that are going to be interfering with your reading, if you're going to have to constantly be getting up and moving around, it's going to disrupt the flow, and it's going to make it extremely difficult to get through the book and to put yourself into the story, into the journey. So if you are reading, make sure you're reading when everything else is done. All the work that you need to do for the day is done. All the stress is out the way. Make sure that, for me personally, I like to read when I'm alone in a quiet room, in a quiet environment. It helps me really get into the zone and really focus on what's going on in the story. Okay, the next thing that you should do is be able to find your genre. Find what it is that you're actually interested in. It all depends on you. It all depends on your personal likes, your dislikes, your interests. Find out what it is that you would actually like to read and then move on from there. Also, when it comes to starting off your reading journey, don't go with the biggest, thickest book that you can find in the library or in the store or wherever you're going to get your book. Start off small. Start off with a book that's on the smaller size. Complete that, see how it goes, and move on to bigger, more complicated, type of books. Whether it's fiction, non-fiction, doesn't really matter. But you want to build up the pace. You don't want to go straight into June, for example, which is very complicated. You want to take your time and start with authors that, are more tailored towards your skill level. And that'll make the process a lot easier for you as well. Final tip that I would say, and this is more for once you're finished the book, this will really be beneficial. If you want to really retain the information that you learn, especially when it comes to non-fiction books, I know I said it was kind of stressful before when it comes to school, but if you really want to, then you should take notes, not because you're going to test yourself on it, but just so you can look back on it and you can remember whatever parts were your favorite, whatever parts you would like to remind yourself of, maybe on a daily basis. You take notes of those kind of things because they will really help you remember the key points when it comes to certain books. And this is something that I wish that I did as well. It's something that I'm going to do in the near future, is taking notes, maybe even highlighting my favorite quote from the book. So when I'm skimming through it, I can see that quote and it'll just pop out to me and I can read it again, I can remember it. But that's something, you live and you learn, and I'll have to do that for the next books that I'll be reading in the near future, inshallah. So that's it for my kind of guide when it comes to starting off your reading journey. I really hope that it helped some of you out there. I look forward to your reading journey and your growth. Reading is a very powerful tool. It is a lost skill that a lot of people do not use anymore in this day and age, especially with social media and technology. I mean, everything is just from a click of a button, scrolling on Reels. Why would you want to read a book when you can scroll on Instagram Reels and TikTok and YouTube Shorts? You know what I mean? Like, that is the type of mindset that people have nowadays. But reading, and I will actually argue a controversial point, even audiobooks, I would say, are not as good as physically reading. Because audiobooks, though they may have their own benefits, will not put your brain through the type of work that it does when it comes to actually physically reading text on a page. But at the end of the day, it's your own personal preference. Whatever you want to do is completely up to you. I'm just saying whatever has worked for me best. Yeah, I hope this helps.